Spring is on its way and nature is waking up here in Wales, so this week I thought it'd be cool to make a button-eyed rabbit doll, but how do I make those long bunny ears without them being a flop? It's been a very long time since I made rabbit ears, so I'm gonna need a new template. I use craft card for this, it's a bit more durable than paper. The ears need to be symmetrical, so I start by getting the shape right for half of the ear, then I cut that piece out and mirror it to make a symmetrical shape. It looks huge, but the hair will cover part of the ears, so they always need to be bigger than you think. I may even need to make this bigger, but I'll try the shape first and see how it looks on the doll. I'm using some of this blue and grey printed cotton for one side of the ears and a plain grey on the other side. I'm not sure yet which side will be the front. I feel like they're going to need a bit more structure so they stand up, so I'm ironing some lightweight cotton interfacing onto the pattern fabric. This fabric has a bit of a horizontal stretch, so I'm placing the interfacing to stretch the opposite way to stabilise it. I'm allowing more fabric than I would normally so I can match up the pattern on both ears. Marking the centre line makes it easier to line them up. I stitch around those, leaving the bottom edge open, cut them out with pinking shears, turn them and give them a quick iron. I'll come back to those later. I've stuffed all the pieces with some polyester fibre, so now I need to close the seams and bead joint the arms and legs. The head, body and lower part of the arms are made from the same grey fabric I used on the plain side of the ears. This shade reminds me of the wild rabbits I see hopping about here by the canal. I decided to make the upper arms from some navy blue printed cotton. I'm going to make the dress from the same print, so she'll kind of look like she has elbow-length sleeves. I've picked out some grey and white stripes for the legs. The bead joints are all going to be visible, so I'm using some pretty metal beads with an antique silver effect finish. I love the design on these. Bead joints give the doll a really nice level of flexibility. It kind of makes them feel more lifelike. The only joint that isn't articulated on my dolls is the ankle. I haven't come up with a beaded ankle joint that I like yet, but I think the primitive foot shape is quite cute anyway. I think sometimes you can spoil a design by trying to make it too complex. Before I sew the legs onto the body, I want to paint some shoes on. I've mixed some acrylic paint in a dark grey shade with a bit of fabric medium to help prevent it cracking or bleeding into the fabric. I've decided to go for a traditional look with some Mary Jane style shoes. Again, I don't want to complicate things too much, so I'm keeping them simple. This fabric medium doesn't need heat setting, but I'm going to give it a quick blast with a hairdryer anyway, because if I leave wet paint lying around, you can guarantee I'll manage to smudge it. Now the paint's dry, I can attach the legs to the body. These just need a little stitch at each side to hold them in place. I want to allow for some movement, so I'm careful not to pull the threads too tight. I've already attached the head with a button joint. You can see the buttons on the back of the torso and the top of the head that are holding the head in place. Those will be hidden by the dress and the hair. The button joint just allows the head to tilt a little from side to side. but should be plenty strong enough to support the weight of the hair and those long ears. I've closed the bottom seam on the ears with ladder stitch and created a little fold to give them a bit more shape. I'm pretty happy with the size of those. I think they're going to work quite well. I'm ladder stitching all around the bottom to hold them securely to the head. I'm hoping the interfacing I used will be enough to make them stand up in a natural rabbit-like position. That looks good, but now she needs some personality. And whiskers. She's definitely going to need whiskers. I start the face by shading around the eye area with ChromaFlow pencils, building up layers of pigment and working it into the fabric with a blending pencil to get it nice and dark. I'm mostly using deep blue and black for this one. I want to give her some pale coloured button eyes, so the dark shades will create contrast and make the buttons stand out. That'll need a couple of coats of fixative spray, so while that dries I'll start on the dress. I've made a bodice from the navy printed cotton with some grey lace around the top. I've got some tiny metal buttons to go on the front. I was going to stitch these directly onto the cotton, but they didn't really show up against the print, so I added a grey satin ribbon panel to the front. I've pinned the bodice in place and I'm ladder stitching it up the back. The pins do get in the way when I'm closing the back seam, so I'm removing them as I go. I had to repin this 3 times to get it in the right place, so I'd rather have too many pins than not enough. The skirt is made from a rectangle piece of fabric with some gathered lace sewn along the bottom. I just gather up the top and stitch it to the doll. Then I can joint the shoulders. The arms are going to be bead jointed to the body. I've already stitched the beads to the tops of the arms, so I just need to stitch those to the points of the shoulders. I hide the knot under the bodice at the back, pass the thread through one shoulder, then right through the body to the other shoulder. I stitch through each shoulder joint once more, then fasten the thread off under the back of the bodice. If you're enjoying watching this little one take shape, don't forget to hit the like button and let me know. You can also subscribe if you like so you don't miss the next one. I've chosen some pale misty grey buttons for the eyes. I want the thread to contrast against them, so I'm using a double strand of navy blue top stitch thread. The eyes are stitched right through to the back of the head so they sit flat to the face. I position the knots and stitches at the back where I know they'll be covered by the hair. The face detail is drawn on by hand with Derwent's line maker pens. My usual style for the face is some detailed swirling gothic eyeliner on one side and a smaller, simpler design on the other side. So I'm not usually too worried about symmetry. This little one is going to have a rabbit nose and mouth though, so I use a thread to find the centre of the face and mark the central features out in pencil. Once I'm happy with the position, I'll go over it with ink, then she just needs a little shading. I want to give her some whiskers, but first I'm going to needle felt the hair. I'm using some super chunky acrylic yarn for the hair in a navy blue shade. This is from the Signet Seriously Chunky range. As always, I'm felting it in with the Clover pen style tool and 3 38 gauge needles, being extra careful around the stitches for the button eyes. I felt in overlapping rows until I get close to the top of the head, then I start unravelling the yarn. I'll pull out the loose fibres, then use those to fill in the front section. I'm trying to get it as close to the ears as I can so there are no gaps showing. I need to hide that button on top of the head, so I'm going to take a few strands from the front, back between the ears and secure them with a bow. Now all she needs is some whiskers. Gutterman wax linen thread is great for these as the wax coating gives them a bit of stiffness. Linen thread can be a bit curly straight off the reel, but it's very heat resistant, so I run it through a pair of hair straighteners to iron it out. I'll put links to the threads and some of the other materials I use in the description. I use a double strand of thread, so there'll be 2 whiskers in each hole. I pass the threads through from the face to the back of the head and cut the ends. I'm leaving it quite long for now. I'll add another pair on this side, then repeat on the other side. Now I have all the loose ends on the back of the head. I knot them all together, pull the whiskers tight and trim them to size. I needle felt a bit of acrylic fibre over the top of the knot. That should hold them in place without any need for glue. I've named this little one Trixie Ragwort. If you like this little rabbit girl, there's a cat girl I made recently that I think you're going to love. Go watch the video on screen now and I'll see you next time. Bye!